I'm the VP of Marketing here at Bloomerang, and I'm joined by our manager, Jason.
Hello, everyone.
Thanks for being here. Well, today we're going to talk about some custom reporting features here in Bloomerang. We're going to spend about a half hour here on the call. Hopefully you can see Jason's screen right there on your Click Webinar interface. And you may have also noticed there's a small chat window in the lower corner of the screen. If you hear anything that maybe you'd like explained further, or if you have any specific questions for Jason, please feel free to use that. Send anything over, and I'll see those, and I'll field the questions to Jason. And hopefully we'll have just a few minutes at the end for some questions as well. So I'm not going to take up any more time. I'm going to hand it over to Jason, and he's got a really nice presentation for you guys. So hope you enjoy it, and Jason, take it away.
All right. Hello, everyone. Today you are going to learn about reports. That's the topic for today. Many of you have probably spoken to me on one or another. Like Steven said, I'm the manager of client success, and what that kind of means is that I head up the support and training for Bloomerang. So if you've chatted in on a support call or otherwise, you've probably spoken with me one or another times. So the focus today is reports, and I know that for many of you, in your day-to-day, you probably handle these a lot. You work with reports a lot. Probably one of the bigger pain points for you, I would imagine, in the past. Here at Bloomerang, we really are trying to make reports as simple as possible. That can be a tricky thing to pull off, considering how complex reporting needs to be for you sometimes. So what we've done is we've sort of gotten rid of the whole query process, as you may have been used to in the past, and we've really kind of put it all into one process where you filter and you report out the same flow. So what we're going to basically do is we're going to look at a few different reports. We're going to look at how reports work and interact with Bloomerang, and hopefully you'll get an idea of how to do some of the tricks of the trade, if you will, as far as reports go. And as Steven said, if you have any questions, be sure to chat into Steven, and I'll try and get to as many questions as I can. And to that end, I want to just jump right in now at this point and start showing you tips and tricks here. So you should all see the dashboard. I'm using my own personal demo database for Bloomerang. So you've noticed here that I've got some recent reports that are showing on the dashboard, an all organizations report, an all interactions report. These are basically just reports that I've run recently in my recent login session. This will actually disappear. If you were to log out and log back in, your recent reports will reset. So it is strictly set to your current session, the recent reports here. But if I wanted to, I could go in here and I could edit a report or run a report directly from my dashboard. You'll also notice then, if I want to go to create a new report or view my reports, I'll go over here to pie charts. The little slider will pop out, and I'll see recent reports here as well, where I can click run, and what that'll do is that'll run that report directly to my screen. If I'm not going to run a recent report, and I want to maybe view other reports that I've already previously saved, or I want to create a new report, I'm going to go to my report list. Here's my report list. So these are all the reports that I currently have saved in my Bloomerang database. You and your organizations probably see quite a larger list than this. I actually just to cheat, I kind of went in and I deleted out some of my old extraneous reports to keep this a little nicer on the screen. But you can see that I've got three different types of reports here. I've got interaction report, a constituent report, and a transaction report. You and your organizations probably have several types of reports like that. If there's a specific report you're looking for, you can use these tags on the right-hand side to pull up just reports pertaining to transactions or just reports pertaining to your constituents. So if I were to click the constituent tag here, those other two reports will disappear. So this is a way that you can really kind of help keep keep it organized a little bit for yourself by these automatic tags that get created by the types of reports that you create. And then if you just want to go back to your all list again, you can click all. So I have three existing reports. I can do a couple different things with these reports right now if I wanted to. I can click on the blue box here and go in and edit the report. I can create a copy. This is a really useful feature. Let's say you've got a report that you've created with lots of custom columns that you've added in, maybe complex filtering, and you know that you want to keep that report, but you want to create another report that's similar to it, that maybe you would just alter in a few different ways, maybe add a different filter into the existing filters. Basically, by copying that report, it's going to save you a lot of time because it's very similar to a save as function in Word, right? You're creating an exact copy of the existing reports right down to the columns that will display and the filters that you've selected. So when you copy, you get the report, its name, and it's named copy. Then you can go directly into that report, change the filters, change the name, and have a new report. I could also go in here and I could directly export this report to Excel. So if it's a report that I know I want, maybe it's a report I run every week, I can go in, choose Export to Excel, and get my Excel report right there, or I can run it to the screen. Now, if you want to create a new report, you're going to go up here to the New box and click it. So this is essentially your first step now in creating a new report. You need to choose a report template to start from. So essentially what you're looking at here are tiles that designate different types of lists that you can create. The four to really pay attention to are the constituent list, the transaction list, the interaction list, and the note list. You also have an option to create a report of active tasks as well. Now you'll notice from your data entry and working in accounts and timelines that we have different timeline entries that you can enter. You can enter transactions, you can enter interactions, you can enter notes and tasks. The way Bloomerang is structured, reporting is based on the type of information you want to pull out. So if you want to see information based on transactions, you create a transaction list. If you want to see information about interactions that you've entered, maybe people who've attended events or have volunteered, and you want to see that activity that you store in interactions, you'll create an interaction list. So this is one way to kind of simplify the report process. You decide the data you want to pull out, and you create the corresponding list. You'll also see some reports in here, like a top donor report, transactions by date range, transactions by fund, open pledges, overdue pledges, transactions by tribute. These are different types of lists that we've already kind of created. We've created the columns that it will display, and we've put in some suggested filters that will pull that descriptive information. Now you'll notice the transactions by date, fund, overdue pledges, transactions by tribute, and pledges, they all have a little present icon there. That means that those are transaction reports. So they're based on a structure of a transaction list, but we preloaded filters in there that make sense for the type of report you're pulling. We won't get a whole lot into those today, but what I really want to focus on is actually creating new reports from scratch. And I think that as you get into Bloomerang and really start creating reports on a day-to-day basis, I would wager that probably 80 to 90% of the reports you're creating are going to be based on either transactions, constituents. So let's take a look at constituents first. Choosing a constituent list is basically saying I want to pull a list of all of my accounts, all of my donors or what have you that have something in common based on their profile. So it could be something like I want to see all of the constituents who live in Indiana, or I want to see all of my organizations, or perhaps you have a custom field that you want to see a report based on. So you created a custom field. I have one in my database, for instance, where it tracks the number of puppies a constituent may have. It's some sort of animal humane organization. I like to track the donors, what animals, how many animals they have. Maybe you want to see who's got 3 or more puppies, right? So anything based on a custom field that you have in your database that you've built in, you can filter by it. And likely, as you're creating things like volunteer availability, let's say you have a situation where you have a big event coming up, you're a little short on volunteers. The event is from noon to 4 on a Saturday, and you're tracking volunteer availability based on what days of the week they're available and what times they're available. If you're tracking that information, you could run a quick report and filter who's available on weekends within that time frame. That would be a perfect example of when a constituent report would be needed. So for this report, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, let's just call it my All Indiana Constituents. I have two options at this point. I can just go ahead and save and run, or I can save and customize. Save and run at this point is not going to give me what it says in the name field here. I'm not doing any filtering by naming my report. What I'm going to get is I'm going to get a new constituent list of all of my constituents if I were to click save and run. What I really want to do, if I don't want to see all my constituents, I just want to see the Indiana ones, I need to save and customize. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to click Save and Customize, and it's going to bring me to this screen. Now, some of you may be confused when you see the screen at first because you see these X's in the columns and you wonder why isn't it displaying my report. Well, the reason why it's not displaying your report is because, guess what? It's not displaying a report. It's displaying exactly how the report is going to display when you do run it. So imagine this grid as an Excel spreadsheet. I'm sure everyone in this session has worked with Excel, and like to or not, right? And you're going to see that what I'm doing here, what you're seeing here, are columns in a spreadsheet. So if I were to run this report now, I'm going to see the name, the address, the city, state, postal code, and email for everyone that pulls in the report. Now, like I said, I don't have any filters yet. So what's going to show me are all of my constituents, and that's the information it will show me. Now, I might go in here and I might say, okay, well, I want to see additional information. I don't want to just see this. I want to see some other things. So maybe I want to see how many puppies they have. I click on that column, I scroll down, and I can see all of my constituent fields. So any profile field, you're going to have the option to add into your report. So I can look for my custom fields, like number of puppies. I can click on that. It's now a column in my report. Maybe you want something summary-based. We have some neat fields that you wouldn't necessarily see on a profile, but that we can add in, like what's their lifetime revenue. So how much money have they actually given in the lifetime of their being a constituent with your organization? Okay, so we'll add a couple things in here. We can also click on the little box there to remove a column. Maybe I'm not interested in seeing their email address. I can go down here, I can click remove. I can also move columns around. So if I want to move number of puppies over, I can move left here. Some of you might be thinking that that's a little awkward what I'm doing right now, and I agree. I'm going to show you some really cool stuff at the end of the training that will kind of preview some of the UI changes that we're making here that makes this a little bit easier, I think, you'll see. Okay, so this is what I'm going to show in my report. Now I need to actually pull based on my filters. Now you remember, I wanted to pull all Indiana constituents, right? So I need to actually create filters to pull only my Indiana constituents. I'm going to click on filters. Now this is where I think people start to get confused. And there's really no reason, because really what you're doing is you're creating a sentence structure. And you're creating that sentence structure based on a logical statement. So you've got two things you can do. You're starting with a pool of every constituent in your database. And then what you're doing from there is you're saying, I only want to include constituents where they have certain criteria. And then you can also even further just say, I want to exclude constituents who have a certain criteria. So you'll notice that a lot of our reports are pre-built in with a filter for account status is inactive or deceased. We assume that if you set an account to inactive or deceased, that you probably don't want them in your reports either. So we automatically put that filter in. You can always remove it if you do want them to be included. You just click the X here to remove the filter. Okay, so following along with what we want all constituents that live in Indiana. So we're going to say include constituents where, click add filter, and then look for our state field. Now state province is here, but I can also search and click on it there. Once I get my state province clicked on, I need to then select the state that I want. Now, I'm going to click Indiana, but I could click on more than one. I could say, well, I don't want just people who live in Indiana, I also want Illinois and Iowa. I could definitely do that. And look what happens when I do that. I click Update, and I'm creating a sentence. I'm going to include constituents where state province is Illinois or Indiana or Iowa. I can click on that filter again to change that. I can get rid of Iowa, I can get rid of Illinois, and I can click Update. So now I'm only pulling constituents where state Indiana. Now, I've got what I want, and I'm going to say, okay, I can now either run this, I go up to Save and I can click either Run to Screen, Export to Excel, or go back to my report list. So I don't have to run it at all. I can just save it and go back to my report list. I'm going to go ahead and run it to screen. All right, so I've got 25 constituents in Indiana. Okay, perfect. Now, I'm going to go in here, and you'll see I've got a bunch of people here with puppies, right? 2 puppies, 1 puppy, no puppies, some with 3. I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to customize this further. Let's say that I want people who live in Indiana, but I also only want people who live in Indiana who have 3 or more puppies. This is where your filters start to get a little bit more complex. You're adding in more criteria. So my qualifications for the people I want to pull, they have to satisfy 2 things. They have to both live in Indiana and also have 3 or more puppies. So I need to create my statement in such a way that I'm using it as an and. It's not an or. We'll talk about that in a second. So what I want to do is I want to take constituents where state province is Indiana and their number of puppies, and because this is a numeric field, I can filter on a range. I'm going to say at least 3. I could also say at most 5 to get people with 3 to 5 puppies. Okay, so now we're pulling in constituents where state province is Indiana and they have at least 3 puppies. Let's run this real quick, and I should see significantly less. Yes, I see 4 results. Notice also that my current fields and my numeric fields total. So I can see these 4 people have a total of 16 puppies and also given a lifetime revenue of about $7,500. Now let's say I want to customize this a little bit more. Let's say that instead of seeing state of Indiana's province and they have at least 3 puppies, I want to see all my Indiana people, and I also want to see anybody who has at least 3 puppies, regardless of where they live. I can construct this statement in a different way by getting rid of this on or. So again, I'm going to look for my number of puppies. I'm going to put 3, and I'm going to update. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull in constituents where their state is Indiana or they have at least 3 puppies. Now I should see more than I did before by quite a bit. So let's run to screen. There we go. Now I've got 30 people. So I have 2 types of people here. People who live in Indiana and people who have at least 3 puppies. So I should see someone from California here. And yes, they don't have any puppies. Wait a minute. Did I just find the bug? Nothing like finding bugs on the fly, isn't there? It sure seems like I did. Well, table that. But anyway, I should only get people who live in Indiana or have at least 3 puppies. Now, I might also decide that I want to exclude additional constituents from this. So this is where I can also create these and or statements, but as exclusions. So I want constituents where state province is Indiana, or they have at least 3 puppies, but I want to exclude any organizations. So I can go in here, and be careful, because if I click and at this point, what this will do is any filter that I put in here will actually create an exclusion where I'm going to exclude all accounts who are inactive and deceased and they have an organization, the type of organization. That's probably not what you want. You want to exclude anyone who is inactive or deceased, or they have a type of organization. So what I want to do is click the or. Look for my type. Click on organization and update. Okay. So now when I run this, I think there was a restaurant. They should not appear in the result. And no, they do not. I got one less. I think there was one organization in that previous filter. Okay. So that's kind of your quick constituent report. Now I also want to talk about another type of constituent report that you might create, and that would be your LIBUNT, SIBUNT reports. LIBUNT report, that stands for last year, but unfortunately not this year. SIBUNT, some year, but unfortunately not this year. These are really common reports that a lot of organizations like to create. It helps them track their retention. It helps them see who they need to go after in a given calendar year to ask them to renew their donations, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back here. I'm just going to cancel out of here. Go back to my report list. And I'm going to create a new report. And I'm going to create a constituent list again and call it LIBUNT. Now, again, you'll see my columns here. I'm going to add a couple. I'm going to add a column for latest transaction amount and latest transaction, not largest. Latest. Okay. So this way I can see my lapsed donors, but I can also see when they last gave and how much that amount was. So I'm going to go to my filters. Now think about this. You want to see last year, but unfortunately not this year. So what you're going to see, what you ultimately want to see are definitely people who gave last year. But those people could not have given this year. So I need to create two filters. I need to create an include filter and an exclude filter. My include filter is going to be this handy little filter we have called has transaction and date range. And I'm going to, I have two options here. I can put in a custom range, so I can put in any date range I want, or I can put in a range like this that's dynamic, that will always show you exactly what it says. So I want to put in last year. So now, include constituents where has transaction date range is any day from last year. So this will pull anybody who transaction in the last year. Now I want to exclude anybody who has a transaction this year. And let me go search here. Has transaction and date range is this year. Update. All right. So now I should be left with anybody who's given last year but has not given this year. Let's go ahead and save and run. And there we go. So I've got a list of 58 people who gave in 2012, have not given in 2013. I can scroll over here and see their last transaction date. It should all be 2012 dates. They sure are. So this is a good handy little report that will help you kind of re-engage those people who haven't yet given this year that gave last year. Now, you customize this. You can also make this a SIBUNT report, so they've given in some year but not this year, by changing the filter just a little bit. Basically, you'll change the has transaction and date range any day from last year. Make it custom and put in whatever today's date may be. So now it's going to include constituents where they've made a transaction on or before today's date, but it's going to still subtract anybody who's given this year. So now when I run this, I get quite, well, yeah, I get a few more people. And I get some 2011 donors in here when they made their last transaction. So I get a little bit more of a result. So that would even help you further engage people who maybe haven't given in 2 years or haven't given in 3 years and so on. So 2 quick reports that were really helpful for retaining donors, for re-engaging donors. Now let's talk quickly about some transaction reports. So what I want to do is I want to create a transaction report, and I want to pull all of my transactions from last year. So I want to say everything that came in last year. I'm going to do a transaction list. Let's say all transactions last year. All right. So now you'll see I've got a few different things that it shows me by default. You see an amount, transaction type, which is it a donation, is it a pledge, is it a pledge payment, the fund campaign appeal. For this, if I want all transactions here, I'm going to go into my filters, and I want to make sure I set that date. So I'm going to include transactions where. Look for transaction fields. Notice that it's a transaction report, but I still have access to constituent filters. So I can actually still do some filtering based on their profile information if I need to. But I want the transaction date, and I'm going to set it to last year. Okay, I'm going to save, and I'm going to run the screen. All right, so now I've got all my transactions from last year, and it's got it all totaled up here in the amount, 181,000, right? But you'll notice some things. If I were to go through and look at all of my transaction types, I'm going to see things like pledges, recurring donations. So this amount is going to be a little inflated because it's going to count the pledge transaction for the total amount of the pledge, and then it's also going to count up all the payments, right? So it's not really, this $181,000 is not really what I brought in the last year. It's really probably a lot less than that, or not necessarily a lot, but definitely less. So you might say, okay, well, I only want to see the money that's come in. I only just want to see the revenue. So let's talk real quickly about revenue versus raised. I'm going to add 2 columns to this report. I'm going to add one for revenue. I'm going to add another one for raised. So I've got revenue and raised. Now I'm going to go into my filters. Actually, for fun, let's just run this again. Keep the filters the same. So now you'll see that my revenue is actually 146,000, and my raise is 114,000. So what I'm getting here is quite a bit less than the amount because the revenue actually came in. So it's not double counting the pledges, it's not double counting the initial recurring schedule that you create. Now you might just want to say, well, I only want to see the transactions that are revenue. To do that, and I imagine this is what most of your financial reporting is based around, is revenue. You're going to want to add a filter to your date from last year, so it's an and you'll actually want to filter by revenue. And I want to see all transactions with a revenue of at least a cent. So now my amount column actually will equal my revenue column because it's only transactions with revenue based. All right, now you'll notice Melissa has quite a few transactions here. Rob has quite a few. Jay, our CEO, has quite a few. And it's nice that I could see all of those laid out, but I also might want to see those based on subtotals. I want to see how much each person has given without having to subtotal it in Excel. So I can go in here, I can customize, and I can set some grouping. So I'm going to go to name, click on this, and I'm going to say I want to group by this field. And I'm going to run this again. So now we see Melissa Signorelli, I see a list of her transactions, and I see subtotals. So I see that she gave $900 total last year. Rob gave $2,875. Now, I can also do this by household. I could say I want to export households. So if any of these people live in a household or work a house, you have them set up like Rob and Melissa are in a household, and I want to see their household giving together, I could say export as households, save, run the screen. Taking a second here.
Hey Jason, while that's loading, a couple of folks are wondering that column called raised.
Yes.
What's that column?
Raised are your total amounts pledged plus any gifts. So raised will typically be higher than revenue because it's counting all of the promised transactions based on the pledges that people make. So if somebody pledged $10,000 in 2012, but they've only paid $4,000 on it, $4,000 is the revenue, and the raised is $10,000. And for whatever reason, this report does not want to run for me. Internet connection. All right, let me try and go back to my report list here. Basically, what should happen there is I should see, instead of Rob and Melissa, when I export as households, I'll see the Signorelli household. So I will see all the transactions grouped in their household together, and I won't see them separated out. The next thing you may want to do is not see necessarily groups for each person, but and then see the transactions, but you might want to actually just see one line per person, how much money they brought in, how much they gave. So what you do in that scenario is you group. So I can say, all right, I'm grouping by name. I'm going to see their transaction in a subtotal. But instead, I want to see that all boiled down to one line. So I'm going to choose to group into one row. What this gets me is essentially all those transactions are going to be smushed into one. So a lot of these columns now no longer make sense because I may have different transactions to different funds, campaigns, appeals with different dates. Different transaction types. So it's probably a good idea to remove columns like that aren't really collapsible. And now, if I run this, there we go. There's my households. So I got the Signorellis. I have the Loves. So I don't see Rob and Melissa. I see the Signorellis, and I see their total amount. So that's Rob plus Melissa's received revenue. Okay. Now you don't necessarily, maybe you don't want to group by name. Maybe you want to group by something else. Let's say I don't want to group anymore. And let's say I want to add in another column for the fund. And I want to group by that instead. I can do that. I can say, well, I want to see how much money each fund brought in last year. So I'm going to say group by this field, and now I see the funds. I run this again. I can see health and research, and a subtotal for that fund of $2,600. General operating, how much does that bring in, and so on. And like we just did with collapsing name, I can also collapse the fund so I can see totals for each fund as well. Okay, so that's a lot of information really fast. A few things I want to show you. Let's take a look real quick here. We're going to peek into the future quite a little bit here. You'll notice that how sort of some of the grouping and collapsing works. It's all sort of like this with these buttons. One thing I didn't talk about was sorting. You can sort any column by clicking Edit and choosing to sort and then either ascending or descending. You can also change the name of a column. So if you don't want the column name to be name, you want it to be constituent name or whatever it might be, you can do that, and that's how it'll display in your Excel document. But I want to show you a few things that are coming on the horizon with the UI, and this is going to change a little bit. So I don't want anybody to be confused in a month or so when we roll out the UI changes for this. We think it'll make it a little bit more easy to understand. Also, remember this moving columns and how kind of that's kind of awkward, right? We're changing that too. So let's take a look. Now when you click on that little box with the arrow, these are the options you'll see. So this is coming in the next release. You'll be able to edit, move, group the field, remove the column, or sort the field right here. So you don't have to go into that edit and then sort. And it's going to sort A to Z. Now, what will happen then is if you want to move, or I'm sorry, if you want to sort it, so you go to sort it, now you have two options again. You can clear the sorting, or you can sort descending instead, so Z to A. If you choose that you want to move the column, instead of having to click it over, a bunch of clicks to get it over, how it will look now is like that. So I choose to move it, and then I can tell it where I want to move it. I can just click in that box, and that's where the column will drop. So 2 clicks instead of who knows how many, right? And then last, when you do group by a column, instead of having that sort of hidden little box hanging out over here, you'll have a grouping options box here, and then when you click on it, you have the option to not group anymore or collapse the group into one row. So that I think will be a little bit more intuitive for people, especially as you have new users coming on. It'll be a little bit easier to explain. I think a little less pain, especially in those moving columns. We also have quite a few new report filters coming. We're hoping in the next release too that will help kind of bridge some of the gaps that we may have in reporting now. So definitely look for that. What I'll probably do is hold another one of these sessions specifically to go over those new reporting features, because it'll be quite a bit more dynamic. So when the time comes and we know exactly what those are going to be, we'll get something out there, another report session. So that's basically everything I had. I know it's a lot of info. I hope that I clarified some things for you guys. I don't know, Stephen, do you have any questions?
Yeah, that was great, Jason. Thanks. Looks like we were able to answer some questions on the fly, too. We do have one question from Kelly. She says that she's been trying to make a year-by-year report where she has a donor and they're giving in 2013, 2012, 2011, and 2010. Can't figure out how to do that and assumes that's something that can be done. So how can we see donations by year?
Okay. Definitely going to be one of those gaps that I was talking about. Now I can show you some. You could create a report that shows you this year and last year. So you can see a total donation for this year and last year. There's actually columns for that. So if you look here, I can show you a lifetime revenue. I can show you a year-to-date revenue. And I can show you a last year revenue. So I can show you 2013 and 2012. For 11 and 10, what you will need to do is basically create a report very similar to this one, but instead of last year, you could do a custom range for, I'll just type it in, for 2010 through 12/31/10. So, and that would basically, you can get your report for 2012 and 2013 in one, and then you'd have to create 2 separate ones for 2011 and 2010 and export those to Excel and just essentially copy and paste into one document. What we're trying to do, I think, with reporting is, I don't know what system, necessarily everyone's coming from, but I can tell you from systems that I worked in the past, when you start bogging it down with all sorts of summary fields, like 2 years ago received, 3 years ago received, 4 years ago received, 5 years ago received, it gets really, really difficult to find anything that you want to filter by because there's so many to choose from. We think that maybe in the future how we'll handle that is by doing aggregates. So you can create one big transaction report and then aggregate a column to show only in that column the total for a specific range. But we really want to make sure before we get really complex reporting out like that, that we do it in an intuitive way that makes sense. So for now, we know that you can get the data. You can get it out in separate reports, put it together in Excel. So we don't necessarily consider that so much of a gap, but definitely we want to look towards the future and make some of those reporting a little easier for you too. So definitely look for lots of robust reporting changes coming in the near future.
Great. Well, I know we went about 10 minutes over already. There's still a couple questions in the chat. Do you have maybe 5 minutes we can get set up on those? Okay, great. Robert was wondering if it's possible to have transactions grouped by donor and then collapsed by year.
Grouped by donor and then collapsed by year. Yes. Well, I don't know. Let's see here, actually. What would that look like? So we want to group by donor. So we're going to group by donor. So I'm thinking what you probably want to see is group by donor and then see 2011 revenue, 2012 revenue, 2013 revenue. Yeah, that's sort of along the lines of last question. It's probably just not quite within the parameters of what we can do. What you could do though is very similar to basically my explanation in the last question was export those separately. So create a transaction report for, let's say, all of your transactions and get your last year and this year received totals. Get those in separate columns, and then create two separate reports again for 2011, 2012. Collapse it by donor, just like this, and just kind of get it for each year that you need. For now, that's about as close as we'd be able to get.
Okay, great. Well, since it's about 1:45, I think we'll end it there. I just want to say thanks again to Jason for giving up his time. Hopefully all you folks enjoyed this. You're going to get a survey later on today. Just let us know what you thought of this. It's our first one, so don't be shy in making any suggestions to us. You can email me personally. You won't hurt any of our feelings if you'd like us to change something or cover a certain topic. And this has been recorded, so I'm going to send you guys a link to watch this if maybe you missed some of the beginning or if you wanted to review some of the content. And we'll also send out the dates and times for the next webinar. We're going to try to do these every month. So thanks again. Hopefully everyone enjoyed it, and have a great rest of your day.